In the 1970s, speaker companies stopped asking what would fit in a living room and started asking what physics would tolerate. One used space-age materials, another needed 24 tweeters, and our number one weighed more than 300 pounds each. Stay to the end because these 7 machines reveal exactly why mainstream brands became more sensible and far less interesting. Number 7. ESS AMT1, the speaker that squeezed air. We begin with a speaker that did not look especially monstrous. That was the Trap. Introduced in 1973, the ESS AMT1 stood only about 31 inches tall and used a conventional 10-inch woofer for bass. Then you removed the grill and found something that looked less like a tweeter and more like a tiny industrial ventilation system. This was the Heil Air Motion Transformer, developed by physicist Oscar Heil. A normal speaker cone moves forward and backward, pushing air like a piston. The Heil driver used a folded featherweight diaphragm that opened and closed like an accordion, squeezing air outward. ESS claimed the air could move 5 times faster than the diaphragm itself. That meant lightning-fast attacks, unusually wide dispersion, and sound that could feel startlingly alive. In 1973, this was not a mild upgrade. It was an entirely different engine, and ESS marketed it with the restraint of a man selling a time machine. The brochure called it the loudspeaker of the future, gave the Heil unit a lifetime warranty, and claimed the system could survive musical peaks above 350 watts. Modern speakers still use AMT-style drivers, but few present the technology with this much exposed mechanical theater. The AMT1 was not merely playing music, it appeared to be inhaling it. Number 6. Acoustic Research AR9, the polite-looking wall breaker. The AR9 looked like a tall wooden cabinet designed by an accountant. Then you noticed the sides. Each tower carried 2 12-inch acoustic suspension woofers mounted on opposing side panels. Up front sat an 8-inch lower mid-range driver, a 1.5-inch dome, and a 3/4-inch tweeter. 4-way, 5 drivers, about 130 pounds and nearly 53 inches tall. Its brilliance was not simply adding more bass. Acoustic Research used those side-firing woofers to cooperate with the room boundaries. Instead of pretending the nearby walls didn't exist, the AR9 recruited them. The result was remarkably deep, low-distortion bass from a cabinet that did not resemble a theater prop. It was domestic camouflage. A pair could stand quietly beside the furniture right up until the first bass note rearranged everyone's understanding of quietly. But here is why mainstream companies would hesitate today. The AR9 was a 4-ohm speaker with sensitivity around 87 decibels. Translation for normal humans? It was not impressed by a cheap amplifier. It wanted current, control, and commitment. That is the recurring theme with 70s engineering. The speaker company built the dream first. Your amplifier, floorboards, and marriage were expected to adapt afterward. Number 5. Pioneer HPM200, built for the super amplifier war. By 1976, receiver companies were engaged in a horsepower contest. Pioneer's response was wonderfully unreasonable. Build a speaker specifically for the new super amplifiers. The HPM200 was a 5-way system with twin 10-inch carbon fiber blend woofers, a large dome mid-range, and separate high polymer film tweeter and subtweeter elements. 5 frequency sections, 5 different jobs, one system behaving like an audio department store. The strangest technology was at the top. Pioneer said its HPM film elements produced sound directly from the film surface without conventional voice coils or magnets. In other words, while other companies were perfecting the piston, Pioneer was trying to remove much of the piston's machinery. Even the advertising sounded like a challenge. Pioneer argued that people who had purchased expensive, high-powered amplifiers were not hearing everything those amplifiers could produce because ordinary speakers had become the bottleneck. That is a brilliant sales pitch and a beautifully 70s solution. Bought too much amplifier? Excellent. Now buy an enormous 5-way speaker capable of explaining why the first enormous purchase was necessary. The HPM200 was complicated, imposing, and visually unapologetic. Today, an elegant tower assisted by a hidden powered subwoofer is easier to sell. Pioneer put the entire engineering meeting on display. Number 4. McIntosh XRT20, the tweeter skyscraper. Now things become properly strange. Released in 1979, the McIntosh XRT20 did not arrive as one ordinary speaker cabinet. It arrived as architecture. The main base enclosure contained two 12-inch woofers and an 8-inch mid-range. Beside it stood a separate column nearly 6.5 feet tall, containing 24 1-inch soft dome tweeters. Not 4, not 8, 24 per side. This was not done merely to win a driver count argument. McIntosh was creating a line source arrangement. Spreading the tweeters vertically helped the system maintain a more consistent sound level across a larger listening area. Instead of one tweeter doing all the work from a single point, 24 shared the load. Lower individual strain, tremendous scale. A wall of treble delivered with the manners of a luxury laboratory. But imagine pitching it during a modern product meeting. We've designed a speaker that requires a large wooden base cabinet, a separate metal column, dozens of tweeters, special wiring, and a customer who has not yet been informed that minimalism exists. Meeting over. The XRT20 is extreme because it turned the room itself into part of the product. You did not casually place these speakers next to the television. You installed a skyline. Number 3. Infinity Quantum Line Source, 17 drivers, and no apology. If the McIntosh looked disciplined, the Infinity Quantum Line Source looked as though an engineer had been told to stop and misunderstood that as encouragement. Introduced in 1976, each QLS-1 tower stood roughly 5.5 feet tall and used 17 drivers. There was a dual voice coil 12-inch Watkins woofer, one mid-bass coupler, 6 dome mid-range drivers, 8 front-firing EMIT tweeters, and one more EMIT tweeter firing backward. That rear tweeter is the detail that tells you everything. Infinity was not satisfied with attacking the listener. It wanted to involve the wall behind the speaker too. The Watkins woofer was equally clever. Its 2 voice coils helped control the system's electrical behavior while extending its bass performance. Above it, the rows of dome mid-ranges and wafer-thin electromagnetic induction tweeters attempted to launch a tall, coherent wavefront, instead of sound coming from a few obvious points. Infinity specified a frequency response reaching from 18 Hz to 32 kHz. Each tower weighed around 190 pounds, and the owner's manual casually warned that connecting the bi-amplifier terminals incorrectly was an effective way to destroy 2 expensive amplifiers. That might be the most 70s sentence ever written. Astonishing performance is available, provided you correctly operate the power station in your den. Number 2. JBL 4350, the recording studio's controlled explosion. The JBL 4350 was never pretending to be tasteful living room furniture. It was a professional studio monitor, and it looked like the studio should have issued everyone hard hats. Developed in the early 1970s, the 4-way 4350 used 2 15-inch woofers, a 12-inch mid-range, a massive compression driver feeding a horn and acoustic lens, plus a separate ultra-high frequency driver. I'll say that again. Its mid-range driver was 12 inches, the size many home speakers used for bass. The enclosure stretched approximately 4 feet wide and weighed well above 240 pounds, depending on the version. The 2 woofers lived in an enormous ported chamber, while the mid-range had its own sealed compartment. JBL designed the system for bi-amplification, separating the bass section from the other drivers, so recording studios could produce huge output with less distortion. This was not loudness purely for showing off. Studio engineers needed to know whether a recording still held together when reproduced at realistic scale. The 4350 could expose a weak mix with the tenderness of airport security. Why would recreating it now be difficult? Nearly every part screams expense. Giant specialized drivers, enormous magnetic assemblies, complicated cabinetry, electronic crossover requirements, and freight companies quietly resigning. The 4350 did not bring studio sound into the home. It dared the home to become a studio. Number 1. Technics SB-10000, the 308-pound final boss. And then Technics looked at all of that and apparently said, make ours wider. Released in 1977, the SB-10000 was roughly 44 inches wide, 47 inches tall, 28 inches deep, and weighed 140 kilograms. That is approximately 308 pounds per speaker. At the bottom sat an 18-inch woofer working inside an enormous vented enclosure. Above it was a large horn mid-range. At the top, another horn used a boron diaphragm, an exotic material selected for its extreme rigidity and speed. But the obsession went deeper. Technics designed the SB-10000 as a linear phase system, physically arranging the drivers so their output would reach the listener in better time alignment. The cabinet used thick walls, extensive internal bracing, damping foam, and butyl rubber. Even the aluminum horns were treated to control unwanted vibration. This was not a speaker assembled from parts already sitting in a warehouse. Its drivers were developed for the system. The cabinet was constructed like civil infrastructure, and owners could operate it with separate amplification for its different frequency sections. The original Japanese price was 1.2 million yen per pair. Yet the real cost was surrendering a section of your house and finding movers who had already made peace with death. Could a company build something like this today? Technically, yes. Commercially, it would be madness. That is exactly why the SB-10000 deserves number 1. It represents an era when the ultimate flagship was not designed to fit the market. The market was expected to make room. For more brutally honest stories behind the products that changed how we live, subscribe to Valid Consumer, turn on notifications, and tell us which monster you would bring home today.